Inside Ghana's parliament, murmurs turned into outrage, and outrage into silence, as one lawmaker stood up and dropped the name no one expected: Captain Ibrahim Traoré.
You see, Traore has become a hero too, Professor. I and him will drink coffee about Traore. But he's doing two good things, that he becomes an international icon.
In a room known for debates over budgets and elections, Ghana's lawmakers suddenly found themselves grappling with a far more uncomfortable reality: why other leaders are not doing what Burkina Faso's young revolutionary is doing. But why is Traoré being discussed in parliament? Let's find out. In a quiet corner of West Africa, a move was made that rattled the entire structure of resource diplomacy. Captain Ibrahim Traoré didn't just make a speech, he made a calculation. In a nation where uranium has long been eyed by superpowers with hungry ambitions, he did the unthinkable. He shut the gates. While diplomats circled, while corporations drafted contracts behind curtains, Traoré halted the uranium train before it ever left the station. And Ghana noticed. When the Ghanaian leaders publicly acknowledged Traoré's bold action, it wasn't a casual observation. It was layered with meaning. He didn't name names of the countries that had failed to do the same, but he didn't need to. The contrast spoke louder than any accusation. While countries like Niger, rich in uranium but poor in protection, have seen decades of extraction with little benefit to their people, Traoré sent a message: not in Burkina Faso. It wasn't just uranium that was being defended. It was sovereignty. And Ghana, a country that has long walked the tightrope between Western partnerships and Pan-African ideals, was finally forced to confront a harsh truth. Resource-rich nations across the continent have been playing a losing game for decades. They mine, others profit. They dig, others fly the loot to Paris, London, or Washington. The Ghanaian president's statement marked a rare moment of Pan-African clarity. He didn't praise Traoré for being aggressive or revolutionary. He praised him for being responsible. Because when you defend your resources, you are defending your people's future. In Burkina Faso's case, uranium isn't just a mineral. It's leverage. It's potential. It's a weapon against poverty, against dependency, against external control. But what exactly did Traoré do?
A young guy, younger than many of us. Traore has changed the price of uranium. France was buying uranium from Burkina Faso for $1 billion every year. He stopped the French to buy his uranium. Today, Burkina Faso is making $85 billion from the same resource.
He terminated multiple exploration licenses that were handed out under previous administrations, many of them signed in French or English boardrooms, far from the eyes of local communities. He reviewed contracts. He questioned their legality. He halted ongoing negotiations, and he refused to renew deals that allowed foreign companies to export raw uranium while leaving Burkina Faso in darkness, both literally and economically. And he didn't stop there. Under Traoré's rule, the Ministry of Energy and Mines was restructured. New laws were drafted to ensure no foreign company could extract uranium without Burkina Faso owning a majority stake. In a country still healing from military coups and decades of political instability, this level of assertiveness was unprecedented. For years, Burkina Faso had been a silent player in Africa's mineral rush. Suddenly, it became the most unpredictable. And in the world of resource politics, unpredictability is power. Ghana, like many African nations, has its history of resource challenges. From gold to cocoa to oil, the story has been the same: global demand, local exploitation. But what set this moment apart was not just Traoré's action, it was Ghana's recognition of that action. For a sitting president to applaud another for resisting exploitation signals a shift in African consciousness. It shows that even the quieter nations, those traditionally allied with Western interests, are beginning to see the cracks in the system. This is not about uranium alone. It's about the principle. If Traoré can protect his uranium, why haven't others done the same with lithium, cobalt, oil, and gold? Ghana's president didn't need to answer that question. His praise of Traoré was answer enough. It said, "We see what you've done, and we know we should have done the same." What makes this more than just a passing comment is the timing. Africa today stands at a geopolitical crossroads. China is investing, Russia is returning, the West is panicking, and African youth are rising. Against this backdrop, Traoré's defiance is more than a national story. It's symbolic of a broader rejection, a new generation of leadership that refuses to sign the old deals, play the old games, or follow the old rules. Ghana's recognition of Traoré's uranium stance may have been brief, but its implications are long-lasting. It signals that African leaders are watching each other again, not to compete, but to compare. Who is protecting their nation? Who is selling it? Who is leading for real?
Uranium here. We have no nuclear power. We are just talking, everything is nuclear. We are just selling. Whether the Chinese are paying us the best price or not, we don't know. We are also afraid. What if they walk out of this deal? But Traore, a young man, a soldier, has changed his country. That's why Traore is now building up factories, processing plants of agro-processing, because he has resources. We have these resources. When we say some of these things must not be said in the open, but let's drink coffee and talk about the future of our country, we don't listen to one another. So, Foreign Minister, may your door be open for further engagement, deeper engagement in the national interest of our country, so that we start running, because we are crawling. We must start running. And this country has an opportunity to penetrate Africa, to penetrate the world, but we must run and we must talk to one another so that we get the country going. Thank you.
Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. Traoré's name just climbed a little higher in that silent scoreboard of African leadership, and the Ghanaian president, by saying what others only whisper, helped make sure the world noticed. But if Ghana is watching, who else is? Ghana's president didn't just praise Traoré to flatter him. His words carried a quiet but cutting implication. The rest of Africa is asleep at the wheel. It was a polite challenge to his peers, a call cloaked in diplomacy but sharpened by urgency. The message was unmistakable. If one young leader under sanctions can secure his country's wealth and chart his course, what excuse do the rest of us have? This was no longer about Burkina Faso alone. It was about the mirror Traoré is holding up to the rest of the continent, and what that reflection is starting to show. For decades, Africa's leadership class has been defined by a pattern: elections followed by debt, reforms followed by dependency, summits followed by silence. They attend global conferences in well-fitted suits, returning with promises of development and vague partnerships that rarely benefit the masses. Resources continue to flow outward, and poverty continues to fester inward. Yet somehow, the system survives, propped up by foreign grants, military training deals, and economic aid tied to invisible strings. But now, something has shifted. With Traoré emerging as a bold alternative, African presidents are being forced to ask themselves uncomfortable questions. Ghana's president simply voiced what many are thinking but are too hesitant to admit publicly. Africa's future cannot be built on old habits. And if nothing changes, the leaders who cling to those habits will soon find themselves irrelevant, not only to history but to their people. This isn't about launching revolutions or storming palaces. It's about reimagining governance with African dignity at the center. Traoré has proven it's possible. He's governing without groveling. He's negotiating with strength, not desperation. He is choosing infrastructure over foreign donations, gold refineries over foreign banks, and regional unity over elite isolation. Ghana's president knows this model is spreading, and with that comes pressure. A new generation of African youth is watching events in Burkina Faso and Mali more closely than what's happening in New York or Paris. They see action where they used to see excuses. They see defiance instead of compromise, and they're beginning to question why their leaders aren't doing the same. The older model of leadership, passive, polished, externally approved, is becoming obsolete. People are tired of being told to wait. Wait for better times. Wait for donors. Wait for reforms. In Burkina Faso, no one waited. Traoré moved, and Ghana's president, knowingly or not, is now asking his peers, "What are you waiting for?" The need for change couldn't be more urgent. Africa is facing an energy race, a digital divide, food insecurity, and a battle for who will control the future of its raw materials. The stakes are rising, and foreign powers are becoming more aggressive. The world is no longer interested in partnerships. It's interested in possession. In such a climate, passive leadership is not neutral. It's dangerous. What Ghana's president did, subtly, was lay down a benchmark. Not everyone needs to copy Traore's style, but they must at least match his courage. Because when African citizens begin to see that some leaders are willing to defend the continent's wealth, those who don't will start to look like traitors, not just failures. And the excuse that our hands are tied no longer holds up. Traore's hands were tied tighter than most. Sanctions, coups, diplomatic isolation, and yet he's building schools, factories, and refineries from scratch. The challenge now is clear. If African leaders do not adapt, they will be replaced, not by foreign-backed opposition parties, but by the rising expectations of their people. Ghana's president, in acknowledging Traore's boldness, is indirectly warning his colleagues the political currency of the continent is changing. Courage, sovereignty, and results are replacing rhetoric, reports, and roundtables. There is also a growing spiritual shift beneath this. Africans are awakening to a new sense of worth. They're beginning to see that being resource-rich is not a curse, but a weapon, if used wisely. They're questioning the logic of exporting raw materials and importing poverty. And they're demanding leadership that speaks their language, not in accents trained abroad, but in actions rooted at home. This is where Ghana's intervention matters most. Coming from a relatively stable, democratic country, his voice cuts through the usual binary of strongman versus statesman. He didn't dismiss Traore as a rogue general. He recognized him as a necessary disruptor. That changes the frame entirely, because if even the moderate leaders are now pointing to Traore as a model, then it's no longer a fringe movement, it's a wave, and the tide is turning fast. So the real question Ghana's president left hanging in the air was this: how many more African leaders will step up before it's too late? Because if they don't, the people might find someone who will. A strange thing is happening across Africa, and no one saw it coming this fast. In the towns of Dakar, the markets of Kampala, the universities of Nairobi, and the mining towns of the DRC, the name Traore is being whispered with a mix of admiration and hope. But it's no longer just about what he's doing in Burkina Faso. It's what he now represents to the African imagination. There's a reason why the Ghanaian president's comments sent such a ripple across the continent. It wasn't simply that he recognized another leader. It was that he publicly confirmed what millions of Africans are already feeling. Traore is the kind of leader the continent has been waiting for. Not another polished diplomat who makes pledges and disappears. Not another technocrat who talks of GDP while children starve. But a leader who acts even when it costs him. In Africa's post-independence history, symbolism has always mattered. Nkrumah was a symbol. Lumumba was a symbol. Sankara became one too, not because of long reigns, but because they stood for something bigger than themselves. They disrupted the script. They scared empires. They inspired ordinary people. And now, Traore is being quietly added to that list. Not by media campaigns, but by raw, grassroots admiration. What's fascinating is how quickly this transformation occurred. Less than 2 years ago, most outside Burkina Faso barely knew his name. Today, he's the figure being printed on t-shirts in West African markets and praised in underground youth movements across the continent. That shift didn't come from PR teams or think tank endorsements. It came from the ground up, from people tired of betrayal and hungry for integrity. And the more other leaders continue to underperform, the brighter Traore's image becomes by contrast. Every time a president bows to the IMF or signs away another mining contract to a foreign company, Traore's popularity grows. Even in countries far from Burkina Faso's borders. He doesn't have to say a word. His actions do the talking, and people are listening. Even outside government corridors, this sentiment is spreading among Africa's thinkers, artists, and musicians. Young filmmakers are beginning to write scripts inspired by his reforms. Pan-African scholars are publishing essays asking, "Is this the leadership model for the new Africa?" Musicians are sampling his speeches over Afrobeats rhythms, turning his defiance into anthems. This is how symbols are born, organically, explosively, and almost uncontrollably. Why does this matter? Because in Africa, once an idea becomes a movement, it's very hard to stop. The continent has seen many uprisings, but very few success stories that ignite continental momentum. What makes Traoré unique is not just that he's building a new path, but that others want to follow it. That hunger for direction, real direction, has been absent for too long. Not because Africans are incapable of leadership, but because the few who dared were often silenced, exiled, or eliminated. Traoré, however, is still here. And the longer he survives, the stronger the symbol becomes. His youth adds to the appeal, especially in a continent where over 60% of the population is under 25, and most presidents are over 70. Traoré looks like them, speaks like them, moves like them. He's not afraid to touch the people, walk among them, and speak in a tone that resonates. That proximity, that human authenticity, is rare in leadership today. Not just in Africa, but globally. And it's starting to cause discomfort. Not just in Western capitals, but also in African presidential palaces. Because the question is no longer, who is Traoré? It's, why isn't my leader doing the same? That question is dangerous. It disrupts loyalty. It shatters propaganda. It forces uncomfortable truths into the open. And that's why Traoré is now more than a president. He's become a mirror. Every leader is being compared to him. Every government decision is being weighed against what he would have done. And that's the power of a living symbol. He doesn't have to speak to lead. His existence speaks for him. But symbols alone don't change systems. The danger is that African elites will try to co-opt the image without embracing the substance. We might see hollow tributes to sovereignty while policies remain unchanged. That's why the people must remain vigilant. Traoré's rise must not be reduced to a trend. It must stay a fire that fuels deeper transformation. Because the real revolution isn't what Traoré is doing, it's how Africans are responding. And when the people begin to believe in new possibilities, regimes tremble. Traoré may rule in Burkina Faso, but his influence is now roaming freely across the continent. He is a symbol of resistance, of pride, and self-determination. And the more others fail, the more he becomes the standard. So the next question is simple, but seismic. What happens if every African leader starts acting like him? Let's imagine the unthinkable for a moment. What if every African president, prime minister, and transitional leader woke up tomorrow with the same mindset as Captain Ibrahim Traoré? What if, across all 54 nations, Africa's leadership suddenly mirrored the conviction, boldness, and unapologetic nationalism we've seen emerge from Ouagadougou? The answer would terrify the West and electrify Africa. For the first time in post-colonial history, Africa would no longer be managed. It would be mastered, not by outside consultants or donor agencies, but by Africans themselves. Leaders would no longer operate as middlemen for foreign powers, but as guardians of national destiny. Every handshake, every contract, every trade deal would be filtered through one question: does this serve the people? In this alternative Africa, the IMF would find its doors knocked upon less frequently. Leaders would begin rejecting predatory loans that come dressed as assistance, but leave behind debt traps and political strings. Instead, countries would pool their resources, invest in local banks, and establish sovereign funds fueled by natural wealth, from gold in Ghana to coltan in Congo to gas in Mozambique. This shift wouldn't require speeches, it would require guts. And if all African leaders mirrored Traoré's audacity, the transformation would begin not on paper, but in practice. Now, imagine the strategic ripple. No more rushed mining licenses signed in secret. No more billion-dollar oil projects approved without environmental audits. In a Traoré-style Africa, governments would demand full ownership of their extractive industries, creating joint ventures where Africa holds the majority stake. Refineries would be built on the continent. Processing plants, not cargo ships, would become the norm. The raw materials would stay home, and so would the profits. But it doesn't stop at economics. The geopolitical landscape would shift overnight. With a unified front of Traoré-minded leaders, the AU would no longer be a polite club. It would be a power bloc. Instead of begging for seats at global summits, Africa would set its terms for engagement. Foreign militaries stationed on African soil, from Djibouti to Niger to Senegal, would face eviction notices. Security cooperation would no longer mean foreign troops monitoring African borders, but African armies defending African dignity. Even education would undergo radical transformation. In Traoré's Africa, the curriculum wouldn't prepare children to serve foreign firms. It would train them to build local industries. Schools would teach African history with pride, not as a prelude to colonization. Universities would stop producing paper-pushing administrators and start producing engineers, farmers, and innovators ready to solve African problems with African solutions. The era of importing every idea, every system, and every expert would end. And perhaps the most profound change would be psychological. For too long, African leadership has operated from a place of inferiority, believing that survival requires appeasement. But in this new Africa, confidence would replace compliance. Citizens would begin to see the government not as a distant authority, but as a protective force. They would vote not for the best-spoken candidate, but the boldest. Power would no longer be measured by Western approval, but by local impact. Cultural identity would flourish too. In a continent often told to look outward for validation, African art, languages, traditions, and innovations would be celebrated on their terms. From Swahili to Wolof, from Xhosa beats to Hausa fashion, Africa would stop mimicking and start leading. The Traoré effect, if multiplied, would turn a continent of consumers into one of creators. But perhaps most importantly, unity would no longer be a fantasy. It would become policy. AES-style regional alliances would sprout across the continent, replacing weak, Western-aligned blocs with strong sovereign coalitions. Infrastructure projects wouldn't end at borders. They'd stretch across regions, linking economies from Lagos to Nairobi, from Algiers to Lusaka. Visas would drop, trade would rise, and young Africans would stop dreaming of Europe and start building at home. This vision is not utopian, it's urgent, because the alternative is visible all around us. Endless foreign dependency, manipulated elections, stolen resources, and growing frustration among Africa's youth. The question is no longer, can Africa rise? It's, will its leaders allow it to? Traoré has shown the continent a glimpse of what's possible. He's made enemies, sure, but he's made something more powerful, a blueprint. One that refuses to trade sovereignty for security. One that invests in the future, not foreign favors. One that doesn't ask for permission to exist. So, what if every African leader did the same? The West would panic. Investors would retreat. Sanctions would come. Propaganda would be unleashed. But if 54 nations stood their ground, if every capital became a fortress of economic independence and cultural pride, the storm would pass, and Africa would emerge, not wounded, but reborn. Because Africa's strength has never been its resources, it's been its people. And when those people are finally led by those who refuse to sell them out, nothing on earth can stop them. Do you think African leaders should follow Traoré's footsteps? What will happen next? Let us know in the comments section. Should they follow Traoré's footsteps? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.